Have you ever felt that devastating pain in your chest when you see the woman you want laughing with another man while you remain invisible as a ghost? That stab that crosses your soul when you realize that once again, you will be only the shoulder where she will cry for the idiot with whom she is coming out. If you recognize this sensation as the history of your emotional life, what you are about to discover is simply another method of the thousands you have tried and failed you. It is the brutal revelation of an ancestral code that only 3% of men in the world know and apply with a devastating mastery. This knowledge is so counterintuitive, so deeply opposite to everything they have taught you since childhood, that your mind will try to initially reject it. Before continuing, leave a like right now, because what I am going to reveal to you absolutely challenges everything you thought about knowing about female desire. Once you cross this invisible line, once you see the truth naked in front of you, there will be no possible turning. We are going to discover the forbidden method that Machiavelli would have used to conquer not only kingdoms, but the hearts seem more inaccessible. Get ready for revelation that will shake the foundations of everything you thought about women, about yourself, and about the power that lies asleep inside you, hoping to be awake. There is an ancestral dance between bodies and minds, a silent game where most follow obsolete rules, while a few privileged know the secret movements that transform the simple attraction in uncontrollable obsession. I do not speak of cheap or deception techniques as the charlatans teach on the internet, but of a brutal understanding. Everything, absolutely every advice, every strategy that taught you about conquering a woman's heart was a carefully built lie to keep you exactly where you are. Do you know that feeling that devours your entrails when you see the woman you want intimately conversing with another, while you remain petrified in your helplessness, paralyzed by a toxic mixture of desire and terror? That frustration that corrodes your soul when you invariably end up being the kind friend who he seeks to let off steam on the emotionally unavailable idiot with whom he is coming out. While pretending to understand, inside you will tend from silent rage, feeling how each of his words is a dagger that nails deeper into your hopes. That humiliation of being eternally transparent for women who awaken your interest, as a ghost condemned to observe from the shadows while others live the life you secretly want. All that you feel, all that anguish that accompanies you on infinite nights of loneliness, ends today, because what I am about to reveal is not a common method. It is a secret code that approximately 3% of men dominates with results that defy all logic and rational understanding. It is extremely rare to find who dominates these principles, because they go against all the social conditioning that you have received as a systematic brainwashing from your childhood. The entire society, the romantic films, even your mother with their best intentions, conspired without knowing it to teach you the wrong path, to program you for systematic emotional failure, to become an emotional consumer instead of a creator of desire. Let's be brutally honest with yourself. You have already tried absolutely everything. You bought expensive colonies thinking that the aroma would give you a supernatural confidence. You tried to impress with expensive gifts, naively believing that money could buy genuine affection. You were the super attentive that answers messages immediately, thinking that constant availability was synonymous with romantic interest. You tried to be the perfect gentleman, opening doors, paying dinners, being the most considerate of all the men he knows. You tried to be the funny with perfectly calibrated jokes, the deep intellectual impressing with encyclopedic knowledge, the athlete, the musician, the artist, changing personalities such as a desperate chameleon looking for the magical formula that would finally open the armored door of his heart. And where did that titanic effort take you? Straight to the friend zone. It is limbo where good intentions rot and become absolute romantic invisibility. That prison where you are good enough to listen to your problems, but not exciting enough to be a real romantic option. The brutal truth that nobody whispers to you because it is painfully corrosive. You were meticulously programmed to fail from the moment you were born. The Conspi system. He went silently to become an emotional provider, a validity of female self-esteem in everything, except in the only thing that really matters, a genuinely desirable man. They taught you to be good when you had to learn to be irresistible, to constantly give when you had to learn to receive strategically, to chase tirelessly when you had to learn to attract magnetically. They systematically programmed you to be Plan B when you were born to be the unique and indisputable option. They told you since childhood, be a gentle, educated, respectful. Do not attack these fundamental values. They are essential to be a decent human in society. But these alone qualities, isolated from more primitive and powerful elements, do not create that magnetic attraction that makes a woman not get rid of her mind, even if she desperately tries day after day. Do you know what really creates that attraction that transcends all rational logic? The tension that cuts the air as in sharp razor, the persistent mystery that keeps it awake spinning in its bed, obsessively thinking of you, analyzing each word, each gesture, a little carefully calculated emotional danger that activates the primitive instincts scheduled from the caverns, when the survival depended entirely on choosing the partner capable of protecting and perpetuating the strongest genes. Think of this reality that will exploit your head and change your perspective on women forever. Why is that guy who is even more handsome than you, nor does he have more money, nor is it smarter, that objectively should not have any advantage, manages to conquer them while you observe impotent from the stands as a mere spectator of your own life? Because he has unwavering confidence, a natural security that makes women gravitate around them as planets to the sun, unable to resist their emotional gravitational field. Understand something fundamental that you have not yet understood completely. Authentic seduction never occurs in the sure kingdom of rational logic. It does not develop in the predictable territory of rational conversations and logical arguments. It happens in pure, wild, primitive instinct, in its deepest subconscious, in the ancestral layers of the reptilian brain, where decisions are made in milliseconds before the conscious mind even realizes that something transformative is happening inside. Do you really think women consciously choose who falls in love? Do you naively believe that they sit down with a list of pros and cons as if they were buying a new car? Of course not. That is a romantic fantasy perpetuated by Hollywood. The reality is infinitely more primitive and powerful. It is his ancestral brain who automatically decides. That primitive part formed by millions of years of relentless evolution, when survival depended exclusively on choosing the dominant male, the undisputed alpha, the supreme protector that guaranteed not only survival, but also prosperity and security for her and her offspring. That ancient brain, that biological computer perfected by natural selection during millennia, does not care about beautiful flowers or romanticized faces in commercial films. It is not mainly moved with sweet gestures of cheap novels. He worries exclusively about unequivocal signs of real value, authentic social domain, and genuine capacity for innate protection and leadership. Instinctively seek the true alpha, the man who does not need to constantly demonstrate that it is because it simply radiates it from each pore, every movement, every word, every carefully calculated silence. The man who walks around the world as if it were his absolute property, who speaks as if his words were unnegotiable decrees, who looks into his eyes without blinking because he has absolutely nothing to hide or demonstrate desperately. Before you think I am telling you to become an insensitive cavernicola or a sociopath without emotions, calm down. It is not at all about being rude, disrespectful, or primitive in the negative sense of the word. It is something infinitely more sophisticated, elegant, and powerful. Deeply understand the ancestral dance between bodies and minds that occurs silently in each truly successful seductive interaction. It is about activating with millimetric precision the correct triggers at the exact time, touching with mastery those emotional strings that resonate at specific frequencies that most men do not even know that they exist in the complete spectrum of human attraction. It's like learning to play an extremely complex musical instrument. It requires deep knowledge, constant practice, acute sensitivity, and complete understanding of the fundamental laws that govern in universal music of desire. I spent a complete decade studying this with scientific obsession, with the meticulous dedication of a researcher, systematically testing it on the real battlefield of everyday human interactions. I analyzed each possible variable, every nuance, every microscopic detail that others overlooked. I studied both men with natural success and those who systematically failed without understanding why. I observed recurrent patterns. I looked for significant correlations. I developed grounded theories and put them tested rigorously until they refined them to absolute perfection. And what I discovered is completely against everything that the supposed experts in relationships that swarm on the internet selling sweet but absolutely ineffective tips preach. Carefully designed tips to make you feel very momentary, but that keep you exactly where you are. Safe, predictable, harmless, and invisible to women that you really want deep in your being. Do you want to know the forbidden secret? The dark secret that no guru will ever tell you because it would completely destroy its business model based on emotional dependence. Women do not fundamentally want an always available man. They do not want someone who is unconditionally there every time they chask their fingers as a faithfully trained puppy, anxiously waiting for an approval caress. They don't really want the constantly putting them on a pedestal as untouchable goddesses. They do not want to treat them as fragile porcelain dolls that could break with the slightest breeze. What they want, what they secretly yearn for with each fiber of their being, is a man who has real, abundant, obvious options. They want a man who does not desperately need them to feel complete and validated. A man so deeply focused on his vital purpose that his presence in her life is an extraordinary gift, not a desperate plea. They want the man who could literally have any woman who wants, but who specifically chooses them, not out of the need, but by genuine desire, paradoxical to the very core of their essence. Here lies the apparent contradiction that confuses so many men. The less you need it emotionally, the less you depend on its validation to feel complete as a man. More intensely, he will wish you with an intensity that will surprise her herself. This is the fundamental paradox of the attraction that very few manage to understand in all their depth. Authentic seduction never begins with a simple, courteous presentation that fades like a stone falling into the sea without leaving significant waves. It begins with a deliberate and carefully calculated rupture, an intentional fracture in the conventionally expected, an electric spark in the silence that arouses something that has remained asleep for years, something primitive that she did not even know that it existed within itself. Forget forever. Delete all your memory about traditional and boring presentations. Forget that robotic "how are you" that dies when pronouncing, and that immediately classifies it as another interaction of the infinite pile of generic and forgettable men who approach him every day with the same desperate and predictable energy that shouts need kilometers away. The first strategic movement is never being simply pleasant or harmless as a helpless puppy seeking approval. It is something infinitely more powerful, to take absolute and indisputable control of the emotional rhythm from the first second of interaction. Establish crystalline that you are not one more of the infinite flock of predictable and forgettable men who pass through their life without leaving a significant mark. Imagine approaching the natural confidence of a king in his own kingdom, but instead of being predictably boring like all the lambs of the flock, you tell him something completely unexpected that breaks all his pre-established mental schemes. You have a face of someone who deeply hates surface conversations, but that secretly loves controlled chaos and emotional storms. Maybe there is something in your eyes that tell me that you know how you probably have a story that would make most people feel deeply uncomfortable. At that precise moment, something irreversibly changes in its facial expression. Its micro-expression is completely transformed. He pauses an emotional eternity. It blinks as its internal system completely emphasizing. His brain suddenly activates as a high-performance engine that received premium octane fuel after years working with common gasoline. Why does this instant magic happen, Nia? Because you have brutally interrupted your automatic response pattern. This mental filter scheduled for years to automatically rule out generic men who approach with the same desperate energy and predictable lines that it has heard hundreds of times before. At that crucial moment, you are no longer one of them. You have completely differentiated yourself from the constant background noise that surrounds it daily. You have instantly achieved that it feels genuine curiosity, real and deep intrigue. And curiosity is the most powerful entry drug towards uncontrollable desire. It is the first dominoes that falls into an unstoppable chain reaction, which can take it from total indifference to complete obsession in a surprisingly short time. This is where every solid foundation of attraction begins to harden until it becomes something unwavering, extraordinarily weird in the modern world, saturated with pleading men, and desperately in need of female validation. True male confidence is not what you say with beautiful words or carefully rehearsed phrases in front of the mirror. It is what you do not need to say explicitly because your presence shouts at a deafening silence that crosses all its defenses. She perceives absolutely everything before you even open her mouth to speak. Read your complete essence as an open book, as a detailed map of your soul. Microscopically observe how you feel, if you take up space with natural authority or shrink unconsciously trying not to bother. Instinctively analyze how long you maintain visual contact without blinking, without sneakingly apologize because it exists in your presence. Evaluate whether your presence naturally fills the room with innate magnetism, or if silently begging space as an emotional orphan desperately seeking external approval. Authentic trust is silent as an ancient cathedral. Walk with dignity without having screaming. He speaks deliberately, slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, and the conversation was a valuable gift that he is generously giving. It moves with absolute certainty in each gesture, every step, every meticulously calculated movement. And above all, it does not fear loss at all, because it knows in the deepest that its value as a man does not depend fundamentally on the external approval of any woman, no matter how beautiful or special. This is the fundamental attitude that you need to embody until naturally becoming an indivisible part of your emotional DNA. I do not need you desperately to be completely happy, but I do not have the slightest fear either. You are completely welcome to accompany me on my personal trip, but I will not change my vital direction to please you. This is the psychological posture that completely turns all the traditional dynamics of head power, which radically invests the conventional rules of the game. Once you learn and internalize it deeply, she instinctively begins to qualify before you, to anxiously demonstrate her value, instead of having to patently plead and constantly demonstrate your worth before her, as all the other forgettable men of her life. Let me make it completely visual so that you understand it in all its transformative magnitude. Think of the last time you entered a luxury car showroom. There were probably two different types of vendors. The first harassed you incessantly since you set a foot in the place. He hit you like a desperate shadow. I didn't stop bombing with questions. Do you like it? Do you want to try it? What do you think? Can I do anything else to convince you? Radiated such a palpable despair that you could virtually smell it in the environment. Instantly, you had the complete psychological advantage because its obvious need dramatically decreased its perceived value to your eyes. Now imagine another completely different seller. He greets you calmly professional. The car shows you with elegance and deep knowledge. Answer your questions with unquestionable authority. Then he strategically retires silently. It does not pursue you anxiously, does not plead your attention. It simply exists comfortably in its own unwavering confidence. He knows perfectly what he is offering. He knows with certainty that you will feel it if it is correct for you. He knows that the product speaks eloquently by itself without the need for additional pressure. Suddenly the dynamics are completely invested. You begin to feel the subtle need to demonstrate that you are worthy of the treatment, that you can afford that level of quality and exclusivity. You start unconsciously asking slightly anxious questions to justify your interest, to demonstrate your economic solvency. The table has turned completely, and now he naturally has all the power in interaction. It is exact the same fundamental dynamic in seduction, but multiplied exponentially by 1,000. When you authentically demonstrate that your life is complete, rich in significant purpose, full of genuine joy, anchored in unwavering inner strength, abundant in real options without it, you automatically turn yourself into the coveted prize, not in the desperate hunter, not in the emotional beggar that pises pathetically for crumbs of attention and affection. This is the most counterintuitive element of all components of the system. Supreme art seducer to strategically give a step back, just at the maximum emotional connection point, when everything is flowing perfectly, when you feel that you could stay there forever, not because you do not care deeply what happens, but because you understand one of the most devastating and powerful truths about female desire, the nostalgia well administered. The emotional vacuum generates desperate longing that keeps it awake for entire nights, circling in your bed thinking obsessively. You know perfectly that magical moment when the conversation flows without the least effort as a crystalline river, when the smiles arise naturally as flowers in spring, when she is completely present with you, absorbed in your presence, hanging from each word as if you were the oracle of Delphi revealing the deepest secrets of the universe. When his body language opens completely, when he leans unconsciously towards you, when his eyes shine with genuine and evident interest, that is not the time to move forward and squeeze until the last drop of that magical connection as an insatiable emotional vampire. That is not the time to desperately cling to that electrifying sensation, as if it were the last thing you will experience in your life. That is precisely the strategic moment to leave, to disappear elegantly as a sophisticated ghost, just when everything feels more alive, more electric, more loaded with infinite possibilities. Yes, exactly as you are listening to. And I know perfectly that it sounds completely counterintuitive from the perspective of traditional romantic logic that your life has been instilled in you. At the highest point of emotional tension, just when you feel more electric and loaded with unfulfilled promises, you simply say absolute calm and total control. I would love to stay longer because I am really enjoying this conversation, but I have important commitments to attend. We continue this at another time. And you leave without looking forward to Lot's wife, without hesitation, or for a second your decision, without being panically see her reaction, as a ghost that leaves her indelible brand in the soul. Actually, what happens later in your mind is not logical or rational. It is completely chemical, primitive, practically uncontrollable. His brain releases dopamine in industrial amounts, and then you strategically disappear as smoke in the wind. You just converted masterfully to the serial episode that ends abruptly at the most exciting moment, in the song that is cut unexpectedly right in the best part, in the addictive book that closes exactly when the plot becomes more interesting and captivating. Think analytically. In the last truly addictive series that you saw compulsively, I did not explain absolutely everything immediately. It did not solve all the plots in the first episode. I constantly left you with voracious hunger for more information, development, resolution. I kept you in a constant state of tension, deliciously unbearable. That is exactly what you should strategically convert. Not the 3-hour predictable film that drags endlessly until everyone irremediably loses interest and begins distractedly to review their phones, but in the tense condensate episode, full of unresolved tension that leaves it literally breathless and anxiously telling the days until next season. This means disciplining that you do not answer at the exact moment that she sends you a message, as if you were permanently stuck to the phone desperately waiting for her communication. Do not answer each call immediately, as if you were faithfully waiting next to the device 24 hours a day. You live your life fully. You move around your world as a man in an important vital mission. A man who has abundant options, clear purpose, own gravity, transcendent objectives that go far beyond any individual woman. Because when she notices your strategic absence, when she consciously realizes that you are not immediately available, her emotional radar is automatically activated in a way that she cannot consciously control. Your primitive mind begins to question RSE obsessively. Where is exactly? Who is it right now? Why haven't you answered yet? Will it be with another woman? Will I have done something wrong unconsciously? Did you lose interest in me? And in that precise moment of uncertainty, deliciously unbearable, he is not only thinking about you rationally, he is emotionally feeling you with each vibrant fiber of his being. Now you are permanently installed in your mind by making an infinite loop, reproducing you as a scratched disc that you cannot stop. Your subconscious is reproducing your voice obsessively, compulsively rereading your last message, as if it were a secret code that desperately needs to decipher to find vital clues about your true intentions. This is the crucial change, the exact moment where the dynamic is completely invested, when she instinctively begins to persecute you, not for a conscious and calculated strategy, but by an unsolved emotional tension, by a primitive desire for resolution, for a biological need to complete the pattern that deliberately left incomplete in her mind. That is precisely what most men never understand in all their transformative magnitude. They stay too long as guests who don't know intuitively when they retire. They respond desperately too fast, systematically eliminating all mystery. They meticulously eliminate all emotional tension, and in doing so, they kill desire in their crib before it even has the opportunity to grow and develop fully. But all this is completely useless if you do not have the fundamental value of taking the initiative decidedly and strategically climbing the interaction when absolutely necessary. Undoubtedly paralyzing, that makes you an impotent salt statue. This is the definitive moment of truth, where most men fail miserably, where all the previous pillars built with such care are catastrophically collapsed as a castle of cards in a storm. If you do not have the primitive value, the ancestral courage to act with absolute decision when the precise moment arrives as a window that opens for a few seconds, if you have masterfully created the magnetic attraction that she can feel intensely in her skin, If you have meticulously built the emotional tension that cuts the air as static electricity, if you have played the strategic detachment game with the mastery of a consummated virtuous, now you need to act with the relentless determination of a general conquering enemy territory, undoubtedly paralyzing, without weakening hesitations, without humbly asking permission to fully exist in your natural masculinity. And this is where fear inevitably appears in all its disgusting ugliness, the paralyzing fear of rejection, the fear of irreversibly ruining everything constructed with such millimeter care and precision, the fear of being seen as invasive, inappropriate, or desperate. But let me whisper in a secret that will permanently transform your perspective for all eternity. Women desperately want you to take the initiative with unwavering male confidence. They secretly fantasize to the man who knows exactly what he wants and is not the slightest fear of going directly because of it, without unnecessarily apologizing for his natural masculinity, without asking for forgiveness for being fundamentally an authentic man. They dream intensely with someone to take them by the hand with natural authority and guide them to unexplored territories of sensation and emotion. Hesitation, doubt, indecision kills more romantic opportunities than rejection itself. When you feel in your bones that the moment is correct, when each subtle signal points to the decisive advance, it acts without asking explicit permission, without asking timidly if you can proceed as an insecure child looking for constant approval. Read its body signs with the precision of a sophisticated radar, and advances with the unwavering confidence of someone who perfectly understands the silent language of female desire in all its complexity. It could be to take your hand delicately while walking and feeling if you resist or deliver completely to your natural leadership. It could be subtly closer during an intimate conversation and observe carefully if your body is instinctively lean towards you or move away defensively. It could be that decisive kiss at the perfect time when silence speaks more eloquently than 1,000 beautiful words, when the accumulated tension is so thick that it can be cut with a sharp knife. The audacity calculated, measured, deeply intelligent, is what definitely separates the real men of children who simply play men without understanding the fundamental rules of the game. It is what guarantees that it inevitably mentions you to her friends the next day with a radiant smile that cannot erase her face for more than try. It is what creates emotionally shocking memories that you cannot forget even if you want to do so. Have you felt every word like a real dagger, relentlessly crossing your deepest defenses? Do you recognize painfully that you cannot remain an invisible ghost in the emotional life of the women you really want? Do you feel in the most intimate of your being that something fundamental must change today, at this precise moment? The ancestral code is now completely revealed to your eyes. The transformative tools are finally in your hands. The map of the unknown territory is meticulously drawn with millimeter precision. Only one transcendental thing is missing: that you decide to definitely cross the invisible line between who you have been so far and who can truly become, between the man who passively observes life from a tarnished window and the man who lives it intensely with devastating passion, between the eternal spectator of foreign stories and the undisputed protagonist of his own vibrant existence. The crucial choice is exclusively yours, and nobody else can take it for you in this universe. No one can save yourself heroically. The emotional scalpel has cut deeply. The transformative wound is open to you. Now it only remains to decide: do you heal as always, or painfully be reborn as who are authentically destined to be from the beginning of time? Leave your war brand in the comments. Write exactly this: I command without saying anything, because you have discovered the ancestral truth that will allow you to conquer without pursuing, magnetizing without begging, transforming your reality without relying on the external validation that you have so much sought uselessly until today.